Welcome again, everyone, and thanks so much for spending the time with us today. I'd like to start this session by playing a quick, about a 4-minute version of our Ben Franklin elevator pitch. It's something we put together when we dedicated this section of the building, with these 4 floors, we dedicated in the fall of 2011. Jim, you want to start it?
In our fast-moving, complex world where advances in technology are intricately connected to every aspect of life, innovation is the key to growth. Ben Franklin Technology Partners has been a key contributor to the growth of new technology-based companies in northeastern Pennsylvania in sectors including life sciences, nanotechnology, optoelectronics, alternative and clean energy, and information technology. Ben Franklin has created and retained more than 50,000 northeastern Pennsylvania jobs and helped start more than 500 new companies. Since 2007, our clients have generated more than $1.5 billion in follow-on funding. For every dollar invested in the Ben Franklin Network, the program has multiplied the state's investment in the form of additional tax revenue received. By linking clients with experts, universities, funding, and other resources, Ben Franklin helps companies prosper. Ben Franklin launched one of the first incubators in the nation on Lehigh University's campus in 1983. In 2007, we relocated the incubator to Ben Franklin Tech Ventures, tripling our available space. Just 18 months after its opening, Tech Ventures was filled to near capacity. LEED Gold certified Ben Franklin Tech Ventures 2 opened in October 2011 and increased the total space to 109,000 square feet. With rentable space nearly full once again, Ben Franklin Tech Ventures West Wing was constructed in 2017 with grant support from the U.S. EDA, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and BB&T. The 20,000 square foot expansion provides additional office and meeting space and allows Tech Ventures to grow its mission as a job creation factory. Ben Franklin Tech Ventures has won the prestigious International Incubator of the Year award twice. Our experience in business incubation is extensive and effective. Our location on a major university research campus allows incubator resident companies easy access to the equipment, faculty, and students at Lehigh, which strongly complement our in-house expertise and network of experts and other resources. We continue to respond to growing needs for incubator space, which fuels economic growth and supports young companies whose technologies, products, and service improve the human condition. Recognized as the gold standard in technology-based economic development, Ben Franklin Technology Partners leads one of the largest incubator networks in the U.S. The Ben Franklin Business Incubator Network brings together incubator managers to exchange information, work collaboratively, and share best practices. Through the Incubator Network, we leverage our success in business incubation to spur innovation throughout our 21-county service area and catalyze the entrepreneurial and technology ecosystem. Ben Franklin Tech Ventures embodies Ben Franklin Technology Partners' legacy of innovation. It will continue to grow as a model in developing and supporting early-stage technology companies that create the next generation of highly paid, sustainable Pennsylvania jobs.
So one of the things that Marcia asked me to do was to explain to you the structure and the hierarchy of how Ben Franklin exists in the Commonwealth. We were created by legislation in 1982. Then Governor Thornburg and the legislature came together to address a critical unemployment level in Pennsylvania. Unemployment was in the double digits in Pennsylvania, and it was almost, or even maybe 20% in his native Pittsburgh. He used to say that nothing is more motivating than the thought of impending hanging, and that's how he felt as governor, with unemployment being the level that it was. So they pulled together a working group of the governor's office and legislative offices and said, what can we do? And that's how the Ben Franklin Technology Partners were born. The partnership is that partnership of business, government, and higher education. They reasoned that the state puts a lot of money into its research universities and that we should be leveraging those resources for economic development purposes as well. And so as a result, Ben Franklin clients have access to university resources without having to pay the usual overhead that a company just approaching a university would have to pay. And that overhead can be 30, 40, even 50% more than what a professor, for example, would pay to use a facility in a grant that he received. But the way we are administered is that our line item is in the DCED budget. And so the governor proposes the line item, you all pass legislation, DCED then passes the baton to the Ben Franklin Technology Development Authority. The authority is made up of a member of each of the legislative caucuses, one that is nominated by each of the four Ben Franklins, although the governor ultimately has the final decision on who he's willing to nominate. And then the balance are people that the governor appoints. And 24 today, Marcia, about? The number does seem to fluctuate depending on what the governor has appointed. So in that scenario, 16 of them are strictly appointed by the governor, and Mary Jo and Marcia are both serving on that board at this time. Questions about any of that? Okay, let's move on to our panel. We have three of our distinguished clients, in some cases incubator graduates, in some cases clients we've invested in that have not been in the incubator. And so I'd like to start by introducing Sam Needbala on your far right. Sam is the Chief Executive of Cryo Concepts, LP, here in Bethlehem. He's the former Executive Vice President and Chief Science Officer, as well as co-founder of OraSure Technologies here in Bethlehem. OraSure was also an early Ben Franklin poster child company. They started in our incubator. They developed the first over-the-counter rapid HIV test, went public, and they now employ 454 people worldwide, 256 of them right here at the bottom of the hill in Bethlehem. Cryo Concepts recently acquired HistoFreezer, the product line from OraSure. So this was something that Sam was involved with when he was at OraSure. It became non-core to OraSure, so now he's taking that business back in his second round business. Sam received his BS in chemistry from East Stroudsburg and his MS and PhD in chemistry here at Lehigh. He's serving as an adjunct faculty member and former professor of practice at Lehigh. He's also published numerous peer-reviewed articles and is a frequent public speaker. Please welcome Sam Needbala.
Let's see. Okay. Well, welcome everybody. I'm going to take 10 minutes or so to try and fit in 40 years of life here as an entrepreneur. So that's my biggest challenge, is to not waste your time, but get to the points that are most relevant. So as soon as we get the slide up, I'm going to work this backwards. So the first slide is really the most important. Thank you. The first slide is the most important, and it goes all the way back to 1987, so just a few years after Ben Franklin was initiated and started down the path, and we were actually resident in the building that's now across the street. So we never had the pleasure of being in this space. Gosh, what I would have given for that back in those days. But we were three guys who all were in our 20s at that point in time, and the one on the left, and we all had hair at that point, I have to point that out as well, had an idea for a sunscreen on a towelette that came out of Carnegie Mellon and a business school idea. Ben Franklin accepted us into the program, and we had written obviously a business plan and presented, but even Ben Franklin was young in how they went about things. And in thinking and preparing for just my 10 minutes, there's only a couple points I can get across. But the one that's most relevant, and so what will flow out of this is just a few slides to show you the results of what happened here at Ben Franklin, was the mentoring and the participation that Ben Franklin had at that point in our lives. And it wasn't about the idea per se, because if you look at what flowed out of all the things we did over our time, it wasn't a sunscreen on a towelette. As Chad mentioned, we've made HIV tests, we've done drug tests, I today do cryosurgery. All of that was about teaching how to solve problems, and it was about Ben Franklin's influence and bet, not on the idea, but on the people, the men and women in each of the companies. And for us, it was the three of us as partners and the skill sets that we brought. So today, each of us participates not only in our local community here in the Valley, but I would say on a national and worldwide basis, helping others and sort of passing it forward. So for us, we were three guys and a dog. That dog was in so many of our literature pieces back in the day and was part of our heritage. And our idea was a sunscreen on a towelette. But that's not where we stopped, because in those early days, what we did is learn a lot of the basics about how to bring a product to market, how to get through regulatory issues, how to file for patents, how to build infrastructure, how to do all those things that don't necessarily come in a traditional investment environment where somebody says you have this much money and when this is gone, you're done and that idea is done. Ben Franklin does something different. They allow you to morph, because in my mind, or at least my experience, I'd say, an entrepreneur is about how to stay alive long enough until you figure out the right idea. And that's a very different scenario than you get in a normal environment of investors who are simply saying, what did you do in the last quarter, the last month, or the last year? Ben Franklin comes at it from a different way, and I think we benefited from that in our younger days, and hopefully that led to many of the successes downstream. So if you take a look at the first company and how we organized with three guys and a dog, we went from that all the way to 2001, where we took the company public on this idea of an HIV test. But we did much more than that in those days. What people didn't understand, because HIV was so upfront in the news, is we had a whole bunch of other products, one of which I told you we just bought back, and I'll cover. Today, when you look at the company, there's hundreds of jobs that are all high-tech jobs, and I was really excited when I always see this video. A lot of the images that you saw of this high-tech, full automation were images of us making HIV tests at the old company, and that really brought about a number of things that were key. The jobs, of course, are a part of it, as Chad mentioned, and I feel like the example of it, the university partnerships. I can't tell you how much and how important it was to have access to the university's equipment, thinking, students, all kinds of tools that young companies do not have access to, but you do in this building and you do in this area because of the relationship with Ben Franklin. Obviously, the community as well. Companies give back, people get involved, they help one another, they raise families. All of that has come through as well. And on a worldwide stage, it brought to Pennsylvania and the Lehigh Valley this recognition of a company achieving something that hadn't been done before. So, today, if I walk into one of my classes and I ask my students, how many of you are afraid of dying of HIV, nobody will raise their hands. But there was a time when people did. And the seriousness of it was really on a worldwide stage, something that didn't have a solution. So in our day, and this is just the inside story, we actually partnered with the CDC and the FDA because the way the CDC wanted to fight HIV in the United States was through an on-site test where they can go into the communities, and if a test was positive, they can immediately triage that person into care. What was happening in those days is HIV was spreading in our cities because someone would come in for care after living on the street, but then they would disappear after they gave their blood sample. And a week later, you'd find them as positive, but you had no idea where to get them. And so tests like this became something that delivered what we needed on a national basis, and that led to a couple things. One, we took the company public. But on a grander stage, you got the worldwide recognition because this had not been done before. And we weren't the only company working on it. And you have to understand what we learned in those early years was how to take on risk. So for us as a small company in those days, I had an R&D group that was about 65 people, and half of them spent multiple years just working on this. And we could have lost. We could have just as easily not achieved the goal. But you see, what you learn when you go through the programs is that we're almost like fighter pilots. We never believe we're going to get shot down. And that was part of what got instilled in us in the years here. And so I don't know if that image makes sense to you, but you have to believe in that confidence that came with it. So we had a wonderful career. I had 17 years with the company, and I'm always happy to say it started in my basement. And then went all the way to a public company. But we couldn't help ourselves, so the story doesn't end at this point. And I used to describe myself as a recovering entrepreneur. Now I can officially say a serial entrepreneur. So some years ago, I started another company called Cryo Concepts. You see, one of the other things that we did at OraSure Technologies was to develop a lot of what you see in the CVS, Rite Aid, Walmarts, where you spray these small canisters of gas onto a Q-tip and you treat warts. We actually brought that product to market way back when, and it was a very good behind-the-scenes kind of product for the company. And as we grew, it grew. And as Chad described, but for OraSure today, with our new leadership, it's a non-core business. So while we had started Cryo Concepts, we also developed some newer technologies. And so in essence, in a collaborative way, realized that for us, buying back a business we started back in 1990 was the most logical way to accelerate the new business. And so what we have today is actually, and this just consummated in mid-August, we paid $12 million to buy back a business we paid $3 million for many years ago, but that business had generated almost $300 million in business. And so the jobs, the presence, the expansion, and you look at the footprint since 1991 has been tremendous. So now what we're doing is something a little unusual where we bought it back. We're still doing our university partnerships. We're still looking at the community. But I now have a bunch of millennials. I used to be a millennial, or I guess whatever we were in those days. But now I have a bunch of millennials, so I have to relate differently than I did when I was the younger guy. But now we're also looking at that worldwide recognition because what we do is supply products that are in a different realm. And today we're all about aging well. And you'd be surprised how much people desire this in not only removing warts, which is the way some of the old products were, but today in looking better, aging better. And so we've tapped into a different side of the world for us. So when we bought back the product, we were making our own history. As Bill Hinchy, our marketing guy, we had to do something here. But our strategy is pretty straightforward. It's a brand that's well recognized and we help build. I actually did the FDA filings back in the early 1990s through 2000 when we took it over the counter. So whenever you go to a CVS or a Rite Aid, you're buying our product. So that's our reach. We're in 44 countries instantly, so distribution is part of that. And we have new products that are patented, that are through the FDA. And so this is a natural fit of hand in glove for us to bring these new products and continue and expand and build yet, we hope, the next successful company in the space. So I started out with the first slide that gave you an idea of what Ben Franklin did for us in those early days and how they taught us and the mentoring and the friends that we made over the years. The outcomes were the basis of that, and that's the part I just want to leave. If we're trained up well, then we're going to execute, and that's what we did over our lifespan with this. So in our 10 minutes, I tried to compress 40 years of what was accomplished. But, can't thank the organization enough and the people especially. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Questions for Sam? Okay. Sam?
What were you doing when you invented, in your basement before that? When you invented your product, what was your previous career?
So I was working. There I am. So I was working for Roche Diagnostics. So I have this background in clinical chemistry. So I worked at Lehigh Valley Hospital when I was a student and then was in that business. So sunscreens on a towelette was totally, let's just try it and see what we can do.
Mary Jo?
Thanks. Can you just maybe briefly explain how the university partnerships work?
So the university partnerships can take form in a couple different ways. You could do grants, and in our early days, we did a grant which we had some students at Lehigh working with me or with a professor, and then we had access to equipment, which again, we could never afford to buy, but we could rent time on it. So there were a number of ways that you could really work with the university, and then some of our employees that are now retiring were students out of the university that then came on board and then spent their careers.
So did the Bens work out the relationships with the universities? You didn't have to do that yourself? They were established relationships?
In some cases, they were established, but the Bens also opened up doors in other universities that we didn't have access to.
Thanks.
Part of our role is to look for the best, closest resource, just like I was talking about the best, closest incubator. We do the same thing with respect to resources, and that can be people, labs, equipment, resources. Gary?
You had the good luck charm, the dog. What kind was it?
Wait, say that again?
I said the good luck charm with you three guys was your dog. What kind of dog was it?
It was a mutt. It was a mutt for sure. And we always said though we didn't believe in luck. It was hard work, and as you would expect. And it was also, as I said, staying around long enough till you figured it out.
Okay. Our next client is Catherine Bailey, who is the senior advisor and former president at Redeeming Beauty in Bethlehem. She was the developer of the innovative Beauty Blender makeup applicator. She brings more than 30 years of experience in the cosmetic industry, and she led Redeeming Beauty to an industry-leading position and category creator, developing and distributing product worldwide from its Bethlehem headquarters. When we started to work with them, they were 5 or 6 employees, and today they're 138. Catherine's a member of the Penn State Launchbox Ladies Council, the Northampton Community College Foundation Board, and the Workforce Investment Board, and has mentored a number of entrepreneurs along the way. She was named the Executive of the Year by the Lehigh Valley Business newspaper and volunteers extensively. Redeeming Beauty was the 2016 recipient of the Ben Franklin Entrepreneurial Achievement Award. Catherine?
Thank you and good morning. I have to admit this is probably one of my least favorite things to do, especially following someone as good as Sam, but I'm going to give it a good shot. Redeeming Beauty, DBA Beauty Blender, because that is what made us famous and changed how makeup is applied throughout the world. We are sold domestically in department stores, brick and mortar boutiques, as well as e-commerce platforms, including our own website. We're sold internationally throughout the world. Our largest customers internationally is Sephora, both domestically and throughout the world. But we also supply other international venues such as Selfridges, Space & Douglas, Mueller. And basically what I tell people is, rather than say where we are distributed, it's easier to say where we're not distributed. So we've been very fortunate in being able to bring our product out into the world. We started with 2 products, the Beauty Blender and the cleanser, that made it a reusable, not disposable product. And we have now ventured into a foundation line, color line, and we're creating more and more products as well in that venue, along with the tools that we do. As I say, our range of products grew from the original 2, and we have now over 25 different products and 125 SKUs. Rianne Silva, the company's founder and sole owner, first came to me in 2003 with an idea. Finally, in 2005, the Beauty Blender was born. We then worked the business out of her garage in California and my bedroom in Bethlehem. And it became apparent that we needed to find a place that was more productive, more profitable, and business-friendly. And we're better than the Valley. And with knowing the knowledge of having a Ben Franklin Foundation here, all the universities within our reach, it was an absolute no-brainer to bring the company here permanently, which we did in 2010, where we started out with the help of a third-party warehouse and distribution center. Our first venture was a 5,000 square foot property that we leased, and really became very obvious that myself and the other 3 people weren't going to get this done. We desperately needed help. But we're a privately owned, singly owned company and are totally self-funded, and remain so to this day, I might add. So we were just starting out. We didn't have a lot of dollars to spread around to get the help we knew we needed in order to bring this to the next level. And that's where Ben Franklin came in, the very first initiative. We've worked with the Ben Franklin for 4 occasions on 4 different venues in a variety of different ways. It was back in 2014 when we had our first engagement with Ben Franklin, which at that point just helped us get operational support and improvements in production capacity and efficiencies. Over the next 4 years, Ben Franklin continued to work with us in various areas and through different aspects, and help us grow, as Chad had mentioned, to almost 140 employees at this point. Some of the ways that Ben Franklin and our partnership with Lehigh, we very directly, all of our engagements were with the university, and we worked with students in our facility. We're not a very high-tech company. We are very much hands-on. We do the majority of our work by hand without machinery. We're very people-driven. But our partnership with Ben Franklin and Lehigh had advanced us in many ways. It increased our productivity over 30%. It improved our ergonomics back to the people and not machines, so little or no physical issues. And that was very important when everything is being done by hand and repetitive motion. It reduced our material handling time by 20%. They even designed and built gravity feed bins for more efficient processing in our packaging area. And that may seem like a small thing, and I think you can see the example of it, but it was incredibly productive for our particular product. And they, as we began to grow and expand our line of products, they helped us with a layout and design of our warehousing and our assembly areas to get the best use out of our existing space. The other thing, the most recent experience, was they assisted us in opening up our enterprise system modules to better service and create user-friendly paths to address our demand planning needs, improving our production planning, and our purchasing process, which over time has saved us a great deal of dollars. I could go on and just talk about the whole business because it is something that is very near and dear to me. But all of most of the information is a matter of record. However, what may not be of record from my perspective is the win-win aspect of our particular engagements with Ben Franklin and the utilization of the university. I think just by having the students working with us at our facilities gave them a tremendous experience in life in a business on a day-to-day basis and the workings of that. We obviously benefited from their knowledge and what they brought to us. It is definitely, in my mind, a very important part of the win-win for both the students and the companies. I believe very strongly that Ben Franklin supports the hundreds of early-stage technology firms like ours. They enhance innovation in established manufacturers, as we have become, and engages students who benefit directly from these experiences. We need to nurture our entrepreneurial spirit and innovation ecosystem to start new companies and to support the young people who want to. We need to keep our business in Pennsylvania and to be attractive to new firms coming into Pennsylvania. I think the assets and the benefits that Ben Franklin provide have certainly been a proven resource to accomplish these goals. I thank you for this opportunity and the continued support.
Thank you, Catherine. Most people think of us as being in the business of creating startups. But as you've just heard from Catherine and you'll hear from our next speaker, our job really is to create the next generation of manufacturers in Pennsylvania, because that's where the highest paying jobs are. And so as you look at our portfolio of companies, the graduates that we've had, the manufacturing impact is over the top successful. And speaking of over-the-top successful, I'd like to introduce our next speaker. Nick Gilson is the founder and CEO of Gilson Snow, Winfield. They're a manufacturer of innovative snowboards and skis right here in Pennsylvania. He graduated from Johns Hopkins University and went to work for Teach for America, from which he launched his company. Nick has received numerous awards for innovative product development and leadership, and he holds several snowboard and ski patents. Gilson Snow made Wired Magazine's Gear of the Year list in 2015, and in 2016, the company was named as one of Outside Magazine's favorite brands born in America. In 2017, Bloomberg Businessweek profiled the company, and in 2018, Nick earned the Small Business Administration's Entrepreneur of the Year Award for Philadelphia and Eastern Pennsylvania. Nick serves on the Governor's Workforce Development Board and on the board of the Innovative Manufacturers Center. Gilson Snow was also the 2019 recipient of the Ben Franklin Product Innovation Award, and when Marcia heard Nick's remarks, she said, "I want Nick on this panel." Nick?
Thank you. Do you guys want to see a video for a second? It's quick. It's like 59 seconds, I think. We keep them under a minute so that the 14-year-old kids we market to, we can keep their attention. Legislators, I'm not so worried about. Okay, so this is pretty casual. I have not come with an agenda or a PowerPoint. I'm here to chat with you about our experience so far. I am completely humbled by the two people that I'm sitting on this panel with, and I have to be completely honest with you. We're at a fundamentally different stage of our growth curve. What these two have done is nothing short of extraordinary for our state, and a testament to Ben Franklin, and quite frankly, you two serve as amazing role models of what we hope to do over the next couple of years here, but we're not there yet. So full disclosure and total honesty. Look, I'm here today because I really thought that Pennsylvania was going to be a temporary home for us. I was a middle school science teacher down in Nashville, Tennessee, of all places to be, starting to think about building a snow sports company. But we were there in this classroom, and one thing that was just extraordinary is that every single student had a fundamentally different background and set of capabilities, not intelligence, right? But in terms of the education that they had received, they're in fundamentally different places. So in one student, we've got a kid who's years ahead reading on a college level. Right next seat over, he's sitting next to a student who's learning English for the first time and just traveled to America for the first time. Sitting next to a student who is asking me theoretical physics questions about objects entering black holes from different reference frames, next to someone who's picking up their first chapter book. And it's just, how on earth do you teach one lesson to reach all of these kids? And so what we ended up doing is we started to take a look at these hands-on experiments, these lab projects, the stuff that could get kids ahead, working with kids behind, starting a dialogue. Because when we looked out at this room, there was this realization, when I say we, I mean my now business partner, the other science teacher at this middle school, this realization that there's no way to replicate the teachers in this room. But we need more. Between us, we got 140 kids at fundamentally different ability levels, and we're only two people. And so we had to turn the students essentially into teachers as well. And so the fascinating thing that happened, and glossing over a couple of really fun details from the classroom that sort of major highs, really low lows, and nobody will humble you faster than a fifth grader, is this reality that the idea itself is really only less than 1% of what it takes to bring a new product to market. And I'll circle back to that in a minute. But so imagine where we are at this point. We're in our early 20s. We're sitting there at the helm of this classroom. We've started these daily lab projects that have turned into these weekly lab projects and monthly lab projects. And then we've instituted what we've now called the Curiosity Projects. And this is an opportunity for a student to work on just anything that they care about. That's it. Has to be school appropriate, and you gotta care. That's it. And you can work on this all year. And so in an act of solidarity, Austin, my now business partner, then other science teacher, and I brought in the original snowboard prototypes that I had been working on when I was my student's age. And just to take a second, it's really simple, right? All objects that move through a fluid, whether it's a boat, a plane, a car, you name it, they're all curved, right? For some three-dimensional fluid dynamics purpose, Mother Nature gets it right too. You don't see too many flat birds or flat fish out there, right? Anything that's moving through a fluid is gonna be curved. And so the initial concept was, then why is snow sports gear flat? And with the benefit of 20/20 hindsight, I can tell you now that it's unequivocally cheap beer, but a lack of innovation in the space. But at the time, we started to ask these questions. And by the end of that school year, we had gone through a couple iterations of prototyping, all in the name of education. And we had no intentions of starting a company. It was very much an inevitability of the work that we were doing. We were so focused, we cared so much, we cared an awful lot about our kids, and we were working 100 hours a week and then going home to this rudimentary snowboard and ski shop that we were building in the basement crawl space that I had drilled out of the house that I was renting in Nashville. And at the end of that year, we had arrived at a version of the technology that was outperforming the industry standards by 26% by speed. Now, with the benefit, again, of 20/20 hindsight, I can tell you that nobody cared because you can already go uncomfortably fast on skis and snowboards. But what we had proved is that you could really fundamentally change the characteristics of this equipment by changing the shape. And instead of being focused on speed, perhaps we could shift our focus over to just making products that are more fun to ride, more competitive, easier to learn, better for adaptive folks, but we could use shape and geometry, the stuff that's been developed by Mother Nature, NASA, the Navy, America's Cup boats, right, where these sailors are literally sawing their toothbrushes in half to avoid weight, and snowboarders or skiers are like, yeah, send it, man, whatever, right? And so we started to adapt some of these concepts back to snow. And when we looked at these original prototypes and we looked at the needs ahead of us, and we realized with a good kick in the butt from our students that we were actually at the brink of starting a real company here, we took a look at our bank accounts. And, I'm here to tell you that if you're single, you're in your early 20s, and you work north of 100 hours a week and you don't go out, you actually do make a decent salary as a teacher. And so we had enough to start the company, but not really anything beyond that. And it was very tight. So we looked at both of our bank accounts, which weren't zero. And I think when compared to my friends that took off to, Deloitte or Accenture, they were blowing all of their disposable income on bottomless mimosas every Sunday anyway, but that's neither here nor there. We had these savings as teachers, and we looked at our bank accounts and we said, okay, we need a CNC machine, we know that, because we've got to build this molding, right? We've got to build our infrastructure, but we also need a space to do it. We need a space to house this machine. And so we looked at Colorado, we looked at the Sierras and the Pacific Northwest, and we looked at all the places that you would think a snowboard and ski company should be, right? And what we came up with is that we had enough money to either buy that first CNC robot or afford our first 3 to 6 months of rent, depending on where in the country you're located. And so Austin looks at me and he says, we're not going to do anything without CNC, right? And you really think that we can make this thing profitable in, 3 months? That's like on the New York restaurant timeline, but without investors, right? There's just no way. And so what we ultimately ended up doing, he said, look, I'm going to call my dad. And I built a cabin in the woods in central Pennsylvania with him right outside New Berlin. Doesn't have running water, doesn't have electricity, but you hike out a mile each day. And at the top, my dad used to run a dairy farm, which he got out of because the milk prices were fluctuating like crazy. And now he's a contractor, and he's doing quite well. And this space, well, it's half empty. There's donkeys and horses there. And there's a bunch of retired dairy farm equipment, but there's space. And I'm pretty sure the rent's going to be zero. And so he called his dad, and his dad said, sure, why not? Which, credit Tim to this day for saying that. I'm not sure that many fathers would have a similar attitude about leaving your prosperous career as a teacher and shifting gears to building snowboards and skis in a donkey and horse stable, but that's what we did. And we thought this was going to be a really temporary thing. We thought we were going to move to central Pennsylvania. We were going to move our original team into this cabin in the woods with no running water or electricity. And we were going to hike out each day, and we were going to build these minimum viable products, right? I can tell you that they look like garbage, but they really did perform quite well. And then as soon as we get our financial footing, as soon as we can attract capital, as soon as we can grow on our own revenues, Colorado. Within a year, that narrative had completely changed. We would not be here without Pennsylvania and the community that then surrounded us and took us under their wing. And Ben Franklin's a piece of it, but really this is a Pennsylvania story. And what happened, there are countless stories along the way, but for instance, one of my favorite ones is that, and Marsha, I think one that you've heard, is that when we were looking for our first welder, we hadn't just invented a new way to design snowboards and skis, we now needed to design and build the machinery to actually do it. There's quite a few constraints that happen when you start doing high pressure compression molding around three-dimensional geometric shapes. And a lot of it required welding, really, really advanced level welding. And no one on our team did that, and it was about $200 to $250 an hour for this. Completely cost prohibitive, especially with the amount of welding we needed to have done. And so we were at a bit of a loss. Through Pennsylvania serendipity, 2 houses down was the world-class welding expert right, for Woodmode, a factory that had been cranking for many, many years. And he walked by to just check out what these, turns out a bunch of hardworking people in their early 20s these days is just kind of an odd sight, so people would stop by. And so they'd pop by, and Larry looked and he said, what are your constraints? What's going on here? He realized our problems. And he said, look, I just had 2 knee replacements. I heat my house on firewood. I just got all these rounds delivered, and now I need to split them because they don't fit into my furnace. And so, tell you what, you bring 6 of your strapping young folks over here, cut all of my firewood for the winter, I'll do your welding for the year. Right? I mean, that does not happen in downtown Manhattan. It just doesn't. Right? That is central Pennsylvania. Right? And we all know this. We're all sitting in this room because we know this state, we care about it, and we understand what it looks like to band together and take care of each other. And that is very much represented here at Ben Franklin as well. And so, as I mentioned earlier, the idea itself, I think, is less than 1% of it. And there's actually a really easy way to prove this theory. Look out at the marketplace at the amount of junk making millions, and at the amount of brilliant ideas that never quite seem to get off the ground. Right? It's not the idea, it's the people. It's the network, and it's the execution. And what has been created here, I can tell you from someone who's just been in the thick of it, is an organization that takes care of its own. It's based in data, it invests in intelligent places, and I'm very thankful that we have the benefit of their due diligence. And then as we've gone out to the greater investment network in Pennsylvania and beyond, people have looked to the work that Ben Franklin has done as they've done due diligence in our company and said, you know what, I believe in you guys. Why? Because Chad does, Wayne does, Fred does, and actually the entire Ben Franklin policy team does, which sends a huge message to me about this young Pennsylvania company and my willingness and excitement to begin working with you. And so now some of the most influential people in our business to date, I met at Venture Idol back in 2014 or 15, whatever it was. And these are people who I saw yesterday in Philadelphia and will see next week in New York. These are people who have roots in Pennsylvania but have networks that go way beyond. And they're people that I know specifically because of the folks in this room and the organization that they've created. And so now when I look out at Pennsylvania and the legislators and the economic environment that you and the people that have come before you and the people that have come before me have created, this is one of the best places in the country to do business. I actually think that had we moved to Colorado, had we had the benefit of a little bit more capital, we'd be dead right now. Because we would have left Pennsylvania, we would have gone to Colorado where we would have been a dime a dozen instead of a needle in a haystack, and I never would have known Chad. I'm not joking. This place is extraordinary. The state is extraordinary, and the organization that the legislators that came before us created here is nothing short of extraordinary. And the reason that I'm here is because I feel so unbelievably grateful for all of those individuals that created this program, and I feel so committed to sharing this with you and the other people that you speak with, because there are a bunch of other people just like this that are coming up in the pipeline right now in Pennsylvania. And I'm sick and tired of seeing them move to New York City to start their careers. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate everything you've done.
Thank you, Nick. Questions for him? Mary Jo?
So thank you for telling that story. It was amazing, and it makes me feel really good, because I think one of the concerns that a lot of us have is people your age moving out of the state, and how do we keep you in the state? But the thing that, one of the things you said was that Pennsylvania was so extraordinarily good for business, and that is not something that we hear very often. I think that mostly we hear that Pennsylvania is a terrible place for business, but it's all linked to taxes. And so I'm just, I don't know if there's a question there, but I found that. Could you expand a little bit on why Pennsylvania is such a good place for business, and anybody else who wants to chime in? Because I think that's an important thing for us to hear, and I think it's also important for us to understand how the Bens play into that, how it's good for business, because economic development and workforce development are things that are really important, but how the Bens fit into that picture, I think, is also important. And I am on the board, so it is something that I'm really interested in learning more about, but thank you, all three of you. But if you could talk about that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Thanks.
And please chime in if you have other thoughts. I think there's many stages in the business's life cycle. You've got incubation, where it's much like a fire, right? And this fire, when you start a business, and look, when you start a fire, it needs a ton of attention and a ton of guidance, and it actually needs friends and family to come and put logs on it and to take their turn blowing on the fire, giving it oxygen, making sure it doesn't go out, right? But then it goes into a fire. You chuck a log on it every once in a while. It takes care of you and your whole family and everybody that gathers around. Right, and so analogous to that is that companies need really different things along the way. And once it's a roaring fire, I have no problem paying Pennsylvania taxes. Why? Because I would not be here, this business would not be here, and we would not have created these jobs and created this prosperity for Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania would not have a snowboard and ski manufacturer and be on the map. Yet now in California, people are asking our competitors, yeah, but does your board have Pennsylvania poplar in it? Right? And so it's because of the incubation that took place during those early stages that we even get to exist, that we even get to have the podium, that we even get to build these communities around the world that have now fallen in love with our Pennsylvania products. And so it becomes really easy for me to funnel that money back into the state where I know it's getting funneled back into Ben Franklin to invest in the next companies after. I think it would be a little harder if I were a transplant massive company coming on in, looking at the numbers and the taxes and all of this stuff. But again, it's a lot easier sometimes to grow something that you want than to try and get it to move to you. An analogous example is we could go out there and we could go buy a bunch of professional athletes, just like you could go try and buy an Amazon deal to put a new assortment facility in your state or whatever, right, for any state. And we've seen a couple of states put their bids in. It's kind of ridiculous. And so there's a cost associated with putting out those bids to try and get those professional athletes or get those deals, to get those taxes or get the benefit of the digital reach, quite frankly. We've found out that we can actually create them. And so we've done that as a business. And we don't generally make decisions on a hunch. We'll test, since breakfast this morning, we've probably tested over 1,200 variations of content across just our one page. And we're also now doing this for rider pages. We're also doing this for my fiance, who happens to be the first ever Indian woman to lead a Hollywood action film. And her social media was lagging, so we brought in some of the chops from Gilson. She's going to be over 1 million followers in less than a month. And so, look, do we want to bring in the big businesses of the world so that they then pay the taxes? Well, we're going to have to change our tax code. We're going to have to put in crazy incentives, and we're going to have to draw them in here, right? Just like we would have to do to try and get an Olympic athlete on the podium. I posit it's much cheaper, much more affordable, much more homegrown, much cooler story, too, if we create them ourselves.
I think your term homegrown, personal, people, intimate, I think, the big guys kind of eat up us little guys. But in my experience, the intimacy, the openness, the opportunity to one-on-one with our officials, one-on-one, the opportunities of the economic development, everyone's welcome. There's no ceiling and there's no basement. Everyone is welcome. And I think it's the people part that gives Pennsylvania, along with all of the financial and other tax advantages or whatever, and quite frankly, that's not the most important thing as far as I'm concerned. Growing a brand new company, building a company to make it successful, and not only that, but nurturing our people and making our people proud of being from Pennsylvania and working in Pennsylvania and having come from Pennsylvania. And I think we owe it to ourselves to start broadcasting that better.
Marcia?
Thank you. So, Catherine, and I think yesterday we toured a cement plant in Nazareth. We see the steel stacks, the Bethlehem Steel. I think manufacturing is changing from what we were used to. And I know when I toured your company, and are you still in Hanover? Are you in this? Because I think you were thinking about expanding the last time I was there. Because when they said, "Oh, you're going into this," and I'm like, there's a manufacturing plant in there? Like, I'm not even sure what I'm looking for. And then when I walked in, you're in with all the other offices and, you made the building work for you. And I think we have to realize what manufacturing is today. So I think your company is really fantastic. And, when I came in to look at it, gave me a whole new idea of what we need to look for as far as manufacturing. And I think, Chad, with the whole Ben Franklin, I think you look at all those companies and take it, and at least help us to understand what we're looking for. So I want to thank you all for what you do.
Marcia, quickly on that point, I think that you are hitting the nail on the head, right? We are done with the days of build 10,000 of these units before lunch and then ship them out, right? That's not what American manufacturing looks like anymore. The reason why we've been able to be successful is that other businesses, our competitors, produce a ton of inventory overseas, put it into a distribution network, into the retail network, wholesaling, all of this, right? Before it gets to the retail store and the end customer, that lead time takes up to 3 years. And the artist has to guess at what's going to be popular on the front end of that. We said, with the benefit of Chad's help and the other folks here at Ben Franklin, we're going to reorganize that. We're going to sell products that don't exist yet, rapidly produce them, put them directly onto their doorsteps, negative working capital, and we're making things that people actually want, and we don't have to deal with waste and overstocking inventory. That's how American businesses are going to continue to be effective, by delivering fundamentally more tailored, highly personalized products directly to customers that are proximate to Pennsylvania. So back to the question about PA being a good place to do business, and as a direct-to-consumer company, we put boards on anybody's doorstep in America in less than 10 days, or skis, that are built for them. And part of that is because of our location on Route 15 and our access to the shipping veins of America.
If I can, one other comment on that. In the new company, one philosophy I instituted was to act kind of like the organic farmer. So what I've tried to do is order everything locally. So you can make plastic, you can make just about any component you need, electronic circuit boards. I can describe our products and literally tell you where the suppliers are. And the benefit versus people who talk about China or going abroad and getting a better prices, they don't speak the language. They're 5,000 miles away. When I have a problem with a circuit board, I drive over to Macungie, to Allen, Oregon, who makes the products for us, and we have a conversation across the table. We fix it, and then we drive back across town. And you can do that in Pennsylvania in a great way today compared to earlier times. And the more we take advantage of that, the more we're feeding the system, the more we're, really, we have the expertise. And the other part I would say related to the earlier question was, I think people are everything. That's why I said I would agree with Nick. The idea really doesn't matter. And I know in my world, which is a lot of biotech and medical, there's a lot of people who live here, who love living here, who want to work here. They don't want to commute to New Jersey or Connecticut or something like that on these awful lifestyles. They want to live locally. And when you can create a company that does that with the support we have from the Bens, then we grow the community.
I think one of the biggest things that I've heard recently from candidates or new employees is one of the most important questions they ask is, what is your life-work balance? And that's part of our business world now. People want that life-work balance. And when you work and live and source your products out of your home state or out of the United States, even though you broaden that, that creates that kind of atmosphere. And enabling us to continue to grow and bring more of these people here to give them the life-work balance that we need, I think is an important aspect as well.
I just want to, ask a question and make a statement. It sounds like you are all talking about an ecosystem for business development that includes a number of partnerships that's help you to expand and to grow, both with the universities and other entities. And as different speakers were talking, you, Sam, and you, Nick, in particular, you talked about the different things that you needed, like welding and, some of those kind of technical skills. And we have really great investments in Pennsylvania in our technical centers from the unions. we just toured Steam Fitters 449, and the workers that they're producing with high technical skills for that kind of labor. So you have a workforce here. And so are you all partnering with like those technical centers? Because those are also investments that the legislature should be making more of, so that we create a workforce that can help you all do the things from the visionary standpoint to actually getting the product to the market. So is that something another entity that you're partnering with?
So they're part of the network of resources that we present to our clients. They identify what skill sets they're looking for. We match them up with sources. Here in the Lehigh Valley, we have 2 really world-class technical high schools that are turning out young people who have recognized that, graduating from college with $250,000 worth of debt is not necessarily the smartest thing to do. They're learning to be welders and electricians and carpenters and earning good wages from the time they graduate from high school. And yes, we're partnering with them to help place those with clients that need them.
Thank you.
Mike.
Chad, broadly speaking, besides the obvious, which is more funding, as a Ben Franklin Center, what do you need from us? What can we do to be useful?
So, to me, my number one goal in the next budget cycle is to get the governor to increase the number of the Ben Franklin line item, because that makes it much easier for you all to support us. George, did you want to comment?
There it goes. Since you got to the appropriation, I guess that is why Marcia asked the appropriation committee to be here as well. And not to veer off the entrepreneurs. I love the entrepreneurial spirit. It's wonderful to see. I remember years back when I used to have that too, and then I took a less risky path and went into politics. But the reason that we are all here is also to hear what you're doing, but also understand the appropriation. So, for instance, I had heard you say earlier downstairs that the appropriation that you get, you utilize to cover your operating expenses.
And make our investments in the companies.
Okay. If the appropriation was increased, what should we expect to see? Would that be?
You should expect to see substantially most of that being invested in additional company clients.
And when you did, and I also heard you downstairs when you were talking about the Texas Instrument, the company, I can't remember what the name of it was, that you had done an investment there and in return had an equity investment. Is that something that you would look to do with those dollars, have equity type investments?
So the way our investments in our clients work is it's an 8-year low interest balloon loan with detachable warrants associated with it. Detachable meaning if they pay off the loan, we still have the warrants. And it's based on the value of the company at the time we make the investment. So if the company goes nowhere, that equity portion means nothing. If in fact they go public, they get bought out, we then get to benefit from the upside, but that equity doesn't act as something that hangs over the company when they're trying to raise money. So it's designed to be the friendliest capital that they can have, other than friends and family and the second mortgage on your house.
So Mary Jo, it's not Shark Tank then?
This is not Shark Tank. Shark
She
Tank is
mentioned
for
it earlier.
television.
It wasn't the investment as much as the involvement of those making the investments in ensuring that the companies would have the business acumen and experience from the investors so that their opportunities and their ability to be successful was strong. That was what I took out of it. The rest of it, I don't watch Shark Tank all the time, but my husband has become addicted to it.
And lastly, I did want to also ask, when Innovate PA went away a few years ago, that funding, what changes did you have to make? What sacrifices were made?
So primarily it was a substantial cut to what we can invest in companies. As in the early days, in 07, 08, when we were cut by 50% in one fell swoop, we cut really deep because we had to. And so when we got Innovate several years later, and that provided us with some incremental funding for 3 years, we did not expand staff. If we expanded services, we did it on a contract basis, but most of that money was expended to do two things. One, to substantially increase what we invested in companies, and two, to replace things like 9-year-old computers that the wheels were coming off of, things that we couldn't replace in the time when the funding was cut. At 14 million, and the number's 14 and a half because 500,000 of it goes to DCED for their expenses to administer us. At 14 million, 3.5 million comes to us. And in the long run, it's not sustainable for us to continue to operate Ben Franklin at the level we're operating it in 21 counties. And so if the level of funding stays at that 3.5 million per each of the 4 Bens, we will have no choice but to continue to shrink our footprint. Today, we have an office in Scranton, we have an office in Bloomsburg, we have an office in Berks County. I would see those people retiring and that responsibility going to the people that are left, and us closing sort of more remote areas. And I don't have a specific plan for any of that, but I'm just saying the reality is at 3.5 million, we're not going to be able to sustain the level of services that we've been able to provide to Pennsylvania for all these years.
Thank you.
Yes.
Can I jump in?
Okay.
I'll make this really quick. So we were talking about testing a whole bunch of variations, and we do this every day, and then we fund the ones that work, right? I mean, I don't believe in charter schools or public schools. I believe in good schools, right? We fund the things that work, and the way that we do that is we measure really closely to see what's working and what's not. And so as I've taken a look at this landscape, look, I would not come in, even if this has been good for my experience, that's not enough for me to come up here and suggest that this should be a broader plan, right? We're a hyper narrow, very specific data point. So I've gone out and I've looked at some of the other programs that have been created across the state, and so one takeaway is that there is a program here that is so outperforming, literally outside of Pennsylvania. Right, this program has become a poster child for what economic development should look like. And I'm here to tell you that if we needed space or a machine, I'd go to a WeWork, right? But what we've been able to get from this community is so much more important. And that return on investment's coming from a whole holistic picture of, yes, it's machines, yes, it's resources, yes, it's help with our QuickBooks accounting when we ran into an issue in mid-2014, right? That's all important. But it's also the emotional volatility of starting a company and thinking that, that risk associated, right, that this could die, that you've got families who are dependent on you, and the emotional toll that then takes on you. Being able to go to Chad then, or one of the other people here, and Chad say, look, Nick, I know that feeling. When I was there with my telecommunications company and that happened, this is what I felt like. Right? That's humbling. To be able to speak to someone who has muscle memory on you, who's got years of experience, who's been there, who's done this, makes you feel like you're not alone, who makes you feel like you've got the support of your state. And so when we talk about these services, I think it's sometimes unpopular to talk about the mental health strain on what it takes to start a company, but it's there. And I'm here to tell you that it may not be written on a line item, but Ben Franklin's looking at that whole holistic picture. And I can tell you that if this were one of our marketing campaigns that was driving those types of results, the gas pedal would be to the floor.
Chad, just picking up where George was going, and Nick mentioned it, downstairs you talked about the $100 million investment that New Jersey made and then subsequently took away. Mm-hmm. Where are we in relation to the contiguous states around as far as investment in this type of program, so that we know that we're competing with, Gilson Snow and Cryo, that they're not leaving to go develop their products elsewhere?
Sure. The way that's measured nationally by people like Brookings and other distinguished research organizations is dollars per capita that are invested in technology-related investments. And Pennsylvania, if you look at the top 10 of our competitor states, we're near the bottom. I included that in my Senate Appropriations Committee testimony. I'd be happy to provide those statistics to the committee if that's helpful to you. Ryan.
Yeah, first of all, thank you to all of you. I mean, awesome stories. And Nick, I'll be looking up your product as an avid skier, so very interested.
Come glove up and help build your own.
And so this question is for everybody on this topic of making investments from the state perspective. Obviously, I'm a big supporter of Ben Franklin. I've talked with Chad at length about that and how we can invest more in Ben Franklin. But we have a lot of other competing interests here in Pennsylvania when we do our state budget. So things like the Manufacturers Resource Center, the Small Business Development Centers, they all have their constituencies and their success stories as well. So my question is just, for you as business startups who came through the Ben Franklin system, is it that you solely rely on Ben Franklin, or were there other projects or programs that helped you at different stages in the development process as well? Anything else that we should be knowing about in that constellation of programs that we're investing in?
I could definitely make comment on that. So even in our earliest days, MRC helped us because in the building over here, I remember staying up for 3 days straight without sleep, going like this, because we had to make our first big orders of products. And then we bought a piece of equipment that we paid off, and MRC helped facilitate that.
This is the Manufacturers Resource Center?
Yep. So, and even today, we'll look at other programs. Like in the company now, I have, a PETA loan that's pending, and we'll use that for equipment. But that all feeds into the same thing, because that's automation, that's building up, plastics, molds, all kinds of stuff. That's that heavy equipment that we need, and we need some way to pay for that. So they're all helpful, and that's where I think Pennsylvania is also unique. And what I see Ben Franklin doing in that is helping aggregate or guide small companies to all that. Now, I've grown up with it, so I'm more aware of it. But when you see that landscape, again, that doesn't exist other places that I'm aware of. And they're all good. They're all good.
I think the integration of all of them and how MRC works with Ben Franklin and Workforce Investment Bureau and all the economic, we have to work with everyone and rely on everyone. And agreed, it's hard to say where more should go or less should go, but it's very important that it's all supported.
I think we take for granted the seamless nature that we have among our various programs in Pennsylvania because, as Nick mentioned earlier, Ben Franklin has become the gold standard for technology-based economic development. Many states have come to visit us and to study what we do, and they always remark about how incredible it is that all of the agencies are actually working together for the benefit of the client as opposed to pulling them in one direction or the other. Come do this in my township or come do this with my agency. So we're blessed with a group of really good, not just good organizations, but good people heading those organizations who recognize the benefit for all of us to cooperate and tell the best possible story. Marcia.
So Chad, I want to follow up on what Ryan said. I think yesterday when we were at the Manufacturing Resource Center, there were members there who never hear from their resource centers in their area. So I don't know if there's anyone who doesn't hear from the Bens in their area, but I think that's something that you might want to take back, and I told them to take back, because sometimes I think when we're sitting in George, you may know, when we're in a PROPS and we're talking about budget things, they might say, and I'll take it off this, I'll use SEPTA. Somebody will say, well, we don't need to fund SEPTA, it doesn't affect us in this area. And we're like, well, no, it does, because it's Lanta busing, it's this, it's that. So you have to know where those dollars are going. And I think that's one of the things, they might say, oh, yeah, Marcia and Ryan talk about the Bens all the time. It's the Lehigh Valley. We don't need to fund it because it doesn't affect our area. It does. So I think that's where you need to talk to your counterparts and make sure everyone knows how important these programs are. And I guess my one other question, so Nick, your company is located where exactly?
You drive about 2 hours from here towards the middle of nowhere, take a right, drive another hour.
And you're there. So why is he
Right
in,
outside Lewisburg.
so why is he in the Benz? Like, is this, in
Actually, to Ryan's question, SBDC read our first business plan, introduced us to the IMC as we started to grow and get traction, introduced us to CEDACOG. Larry Seibert was at CEDACOG, who then was our representative at Ben Franklin. I then met Chad, and so it's this ecosystem, right? And they're not competitive with each other, as I think has been highlighted here. But seriously, like literally not, they're all working for the benefit.
well, because I think earlier Chad said if we don't have it here, right? So agriculture, you send out to the center part of the state. I was just
Right.
wondering why you're,
Well, because he's in one of our 21 counties.
oh, he's one of your 21.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
We go all the way to the Susquehanna River.
Oh, okay,
Yep.
sorry, missed that.
We're right
Thank
outside
you.
Lewisburg, so
Okay.
I was kind of joking, but it's in a place where we are one of very few games around in terms of having manufacturing work.
Good, thank you.
Donna?
Thank you. I'm glad we got to that. Thank you for the question, Ryan. So this is not the first time that I've heard from the Bens. I was an economic developer. I'm well aware of what Ben Franklin Partnership does for our Commonwealth. But I want to first of all say thank you to the three of you, because if you weren't willing to take that risk, it wouldn't matter what Ben Franklin was doing. We need people who are willing to take that. And I do think that it's calculated when you work with Ben Franklin. We heard when we were at the launch box, Catherine, thank you for your service on that area, in that area as well, that their foundations and the angel investors and all of these individuals know, to your point, Nick, that you know what you're doing. You've been worked through that process. So thank you for that. On the seamless work with this SBDC and those things, I think that I heard it from you, Sam, that you've worked with Ben Franklin on multiple occasions. So you get in there, you deal with that issue, you grow. You come up with another issue, you work with them, you grow. And Catherine, the question that I had when you were talking was, you're now working on coloring and different things. Are you working with Ben Franklin to do wet lab or to come up with those researchers, or how does that work for you?
In terms of our product?
Right, your product development.
Basically, we have not worked through the product with Ben Franklin. We're more with the processes and the technology that they could supply us.
Okay.
We have, most of our core products are sourced from the United States. And then we have a group of product developers that work with the color line, developing that all over the world. But that product is not something that we've ever worked through with Ben Franklin.
Great. Well, thank you all. I really appreciate your information, and I'm pleased to know that that product is made in the United States, because my daughter turned me on to that, and now I've bought my fair share.
Thank you for that, Donna. Any other questions from me or the panel? Thank you all so very much for spending so much time with us, and please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have follow-on questions, and we look forward to seeing you all again when we come to visit you all in Harrisburg. Luncheon is served.